I never thought I'd be starting over at 62. I never imagined I'd be packing away 35 years of marriage into cardboard boxes, sorting through decades of memories and asking myself which ones were real and which were illusions. But that's exactly what I found myself doing the day Robert told me his mother needed to move in with us permanently, and that I'd need to convert my art studio into her bedroom. "It's not a request, Ellie," he said, his voice unusually firm as he stood in our kitchen, arms crossed. "Mom's falling too often to live alone, and the money we've saved for retirement needs to last. We can't afford assisted living." I stared at him, this man I'd built a life with, raised a daughter with, and suddenly felt like I was looking at a stranger. Because what Robert didn't know, what his mother had conveniently never told him, was that Vivian Mitchell had more than enough money to afford the finest care facility in Michigan. I knew because I'd been managing our family finances for decades. I knew because I'd seen the statements from her financial advisor that she'd accidentally left at our house. I knew because for 35 years, I'd been the one making sure our family stayed afloat, while Robert and his mother pretended the money appeared by magic. That conversation was the first thread pulled in a sweater I'd been knitting for decades. Within weeks, my marriage unraveled completely. But what Robert never expected was that I had been preparing for this moment without even realizing it. And when the time came to show my hand, the look on his face was worth every silent sacrifice I had ever made. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I met Robert Mitchell during my final year of accounting school, in 1988. He was handsome, ambitious, and worked at his father's insurance agency with plans to take it over someday. I was 26, determined to build my own accounting practice, and had just been offered a promising position at a firm in Chicago. We fell in love quickly, the way you do when you're young and still believe that love conquers all practical concerns. 6 months into our relationship, Robert's father suffered a severe stroke. Everything changed overnight. Robert needed to take over the family business immediately, in Lakeside, Michigan, not Chicago. When he asked me to marry him and move to his hometown, I believed it was the first of many compromises we would both make over our lifetime together. I accepted the ring, declined the Chicago offer, and prepared to build a different life than the one I had planned. "We'll make it work, Ellie," he promised, kissing my forehead as we drove into Lakeside for the first time as an engaged couple. "Dad built a good business. We'll have a good life here." What Robert didn't mention was that we included his mother Vivian, a widow with definite ideas about her son's future and the woman who should share it. From the moment I met her, Vivian made it clear that no woman would ever be good enough for her Robert, especially not one with career aspirations, as she called them, her mouth puckering as though she'd tasted something sour. "A wife's place is managing the household," she informed me during our first dinner together. "Robert needs someone focused on making a comfortable home, not playing with numbers all day." Robert squeezed my hand under the table but said nothing to contradict his mother. It was the first silence of many. I found a compromise, a small accounting job with flexible hours at Lakeside Community Bank, and I made sure our home ran smoothly. I learned to cook Robert's favorite meals, maintained the house to Vivian's exacting standards during her weekly inspections, and tried to build a life in a town where I was always introduced as Robert's wife from downstate, even. Years after we'd settled there, when our daughter Olivia was born in 1990, I scaled back my hours further, taking on freelance bookkeeping from home. Robert's business was growing, but insurance has feast and famine cycles. Without telling him, because he found financial discussions stressful, I managed our household budget carefully, setting aside small amounts regularly in an account for emergencies. "You worry too much about money," Robert would say whenever I suggested we should be more careful with spending. "The business is doing fine. Mom says Dad always handled the finances and never bothered her with it. That worked for them." What Robert didn't know was that his father had left significant debts that I gradually paid down from my earnings, while maintaining the illusion that everything was fine. I didn't want to damage his confidence or his family's reputation in the small town. So I smiled and managed and calculated and sacrificed in silence. When Olivia was 7, Robert's agency faced a crisis when a major regional carrier dropped them. For 6 months, our income was cut in half. Robert was devastated, questioning himself and the business. I quietly dipped into my emergency fund to keep us afloat, telling Robert I'd received a bonus at work. I worked late into the night doing extra bookkeeping jobs. I made sure Olivia never felt the strain. I don't know how you're keeping it all together, Martha, my one close friend in town, said to me over coffee during that period. Most couples would be falling apart under this kind of stress. I shrugged. We're partners. This is what you do. What I didn't say was that I was exhausted. That I sometimes stared at the ceiling at night, wondering if I'd given up too much of myself. That Robert seemed to take my support entirely for granted, never asking how I managed our finances so well, or how we were affording the swim lessons and piano classes for Olivia that never stopped during the downturn. Vivian, meanwhile, lived in the large Tudor home Robert's father had built for her, driving a new luxury car every 3 years, taking lavish vacations, and never seeming to worry about money. When I once gently suggested she might help during the agency's difficult period, Robert was horrified. We can't ask Mom for money, Ellie. She's on a fixed income. Dad left her what he could, but she needs to be careful too. So I never mentioned it again, even though I had seen Vivian's bank statements accidentally left at our house. Statements showing investment accounts with balances that made our emergency fund look like pocket change. It wasn't my place to correct my husband's understanding of his mother's finances, or so I believed at the time. By the time Olivia left for college in 2008, I had built a respectable freelance accounting business serving small businesses in Lakeside. I managed Vivian's taxes each year, though she insisted on having a real accountant in Grand Rapids review my work. I handled all our family finances. I invested carefully. I built our retirement savings steadily, despite Robert's occasional large purchases that he deemed necessary for the business or our home. "You're so good with money, Ellie," he would say with admiration but no real interest in how it all worked. "I don't know what I'd do without you." I loved him. Despite his blind spot about his mother, despite the compromises, I loved the life we'd built. I was proud of our beautiful daughter, now a successful architect in Seattle, married to Daniel, a wonderful man who appreciated her ambition. I was proud of the comfortable home we'd created, the standing we had in the community, the future we were building toward. Then came Robert's 65th birthday and the beginning of the end of everything I thought I knew about our marriage. We threw a party at St. Mark's Church Hall, nothing extravagant, but nice. Most of Lakeside showed up. Robert was well liked, a fixture in the community, president of the Rotary Club, everyone's favorite insurance agent. I'd spent weeks planning, making sure every detail was perfect. Vivian arrived an hour early while I was still setting up. At 86, she remained a commanding presence. Silver hair, perfectly styled, outfit immaculate, posture military straight, despite her recent complaints about mobility. "Eleanor," she said, never using my preferred name even after 35 years. "I need to speak with Robert privately before everyone arrives. Family business." I nodded pleasantly, used to these private conversations that excluded me. Of course, he's in the side office going over his thank you speech. When Robert emerged 20 minutes later, his expression was unreadable. Throughout the party, he seemed distracted, though he smiled and accepted congratulations graciously. It wasn't until we were home that evening, the dishwasher humming in the background, that he told me. "I've decided to retire," he said, loosening his tie. "Mom thinks it's time. We've found a buyer for the agency. The papers are already drawn up. I nearly dropped the crystal platter I was drying. What? When did this happen? We talked about you reducing hours, but selling completely? Robert, we've been planning for you to transition over 5 years to maximize the value. He looked annoyed. Mom introduced me to Jim Collier's son. You remember Jim from Grand Rapids? His son wants to expand into Lakeside. They're offering a fair price, and I can walk away clean. No transition period, no complications. But what about our retirement calculations? What about the tax implications? Robert, these decisions affect both of us. I struggled to keep my voice level. You didn't think to include me in this conversation? It's done, Ellie. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. His tone was final. The offer's solid. Mom had her financial guy look it over. Her financial guy? I set down the platter carefully. Robert, I'm an accountant. This is literally what I do professionally, and I'm your wife. Don't start, he sighed. You know, Mom has always handled the big Mitchell family decisions. This is about my father's legacy. I bit my tongue hard enough to taste blood. After 35 years, I was still an outsider when it came to Mitchell family decisions. I nodded stiffly and finished cleaning up in silence. The next morning, Robert handed me a folder. Here's the offer paperwork. Since you're concerned, look it over. But the decision is made. I spent that afternoon reviewing the documents, my stomach sinking further with each page. The offer was significantly below market value. The payment terms were unfavorable. The non-compete was unnecessarily restrictive. It was, in short, a terrible deal clearly designed by someone taking advantage of a man eager to please his mother. That evening, I laid out my concerns carefully, with specific numbers and comparisons to similar agency sales. Robert listened, impatiently. Mom says I should take it, he repeated. She says at our age we should prioritize a clean break over maximum profit. She says her friend Doris's husband held out for a better offer and then dropped dead before the sale went through. Robert, I said as calmly as possible, has it occurred to you that your mother might not have your best interests at heart? This offer would leave us with significantly less for retirement than we've planned for. His face darkened. That's a terrible thing to say. Mom has always looked out for me, for us. She's done nothing but support this family. Except financially during our hardest times, I said before I could stop myself. When we were struggling and she was taking Mediterranean cruises. She earned that money. Dad made sure she was taken care of, and good for him. Robert stood up, towering over me. I'm taking this offer, Ellie. It's decided. 2 weeks later, Robert Mitchell Insurance Agency officially changed hands. The final sale price was even lower than the initial offer after the buyer's due diligence uncovered concerns that were standard in any insurance business our size. I moved the money into our accounts, restructured our retirement plans as best I could to accommodate the shortfall, and said nothing more about it. Peace in our marriage seemed more important than being right. It always had. Then came Vivian's fall. Then came her doctor's recommendation that she no longer live alone. Then came Robert's announcement that she would move in with us, into my art studio, the one space in our home that was truly mine, where I'd finally begun painting again after putting that dream aside for decades. We'll find another space? For your painting stuff, Robert said dismissively. The basement, maybe. The basement has a humidity problem, I reminded him. It would ruin the canvases. What about assisted living? The Lakeside Shores facility is excellent. And with her, finances. Mom doesn't have that kind of money, Robert interrupted. And we can't afford $6,000 a month for her care. Not after the agency sale. I took a deep breath. Robert, I've done your mother's taxes for 20 years. I know exactly what she has. His eyes narrowed. What are you saying? I'm saying Your mother has more than enough money to afford the best care available. She has investments worth over $2 million. The dividends alone would cover assisted living expenses without touching the principal. Robert stared at me as though I'd slapped him. That's impossible, she would have told me. Would she? I asked quietly. Has she ever been fully honest? About her finances? You're lying, he said, his voice cold. You've always been jealous of my relationship with her. You're making this up because you don't want her living here. I went to my office, pulled out Vivian's most recent tax returns, and handed them to him silently. He glanced at them, then thrust them back at me. These could be manipulated. You prepare them. How do I know what's real? The accusation stunned me. In 35 years of marriage, Robert had never questioned my integrity. You think I would commit tax fraud? I think you want my mother out of your hair. I think you've always resented her. I think you're being selfish. I stood very still, feeling something fundamental shift between us. I've spent my entire marriage supporting you, Robert, making compromises, solving problems quietly so you wouldn't have to worry. I've never asked for anything in return except respect. If you respected me, he said, you wouldn't try to come between me and my mother. That night, Robert slept in the guest room. The next day, he went to Vivian's house and stayed there. 3 days passed with minimal communication, just brief, cold texts about household matters. On the 4th day, he returned home with Vivian and his sister Helen in tow. They sat at our kitchen table like a tribunal, faces solemn. Eleanor, Vivian began, her voice quavering with carefully manufactured fragility. Robert tells me you've been making wild accusations about my finances, that you're refusing to welcome me into your home in my time of need. Our home, I corrected quietly. The home Robert and I built together. Helen leaned forward. Mom needs family now, Ellie. If you can't put aside your issues, for her sake, what does that say about your commitment to this family? This isn't about commitment, I replied. It's about honesty. Vivian has more than enough resources for professional care. Care that would be better for her than what we can provide here. So cold, Vivian murmured to Robert. I told you she never really accepted me. Robert wouldn't meet my eyes. Ellie, Mom is moving in. I've already called contractors about converting your studio. This discussion is over. I looked at each of their faces. Vivian's smug triumph, poorly concealed behind a mask of frailty, Helen's righteous indignation, and worst of all, Robert's complete surrender to their manipulation. 35 years of marriage, and he couldn't even look at me while dismantling my needs and dismissing my concerns. Something inside me, something that had bent and accommodated and compromised for decades, finally broke. No, I said. Simply, no, Robert repeated, finally meeting my gaze. No, I will not give up my studio. No, I will not participate in this charade. No, I will not be the villain in the story you're all telling yourselves. I stood up, surprisingly calm. I've managed our finances for 35 years, Robert. I've quietly fixed problems you never knew existed. I've stretched dollars during hard times and built our retirement security while you made grand gestures with money we sometimes didn't have. I've done your mother's taxes and watched her hide her wealth from you while you defended her fixed income status. Vivian's face had gone pale. Helen looked confused. Robert just looked angry. You're exaggerating your contributions, he said dismissively. I built the business. I earned our living. Did you? I asked softly. Let me show you something. I walked to my office and returned with a thick folder. These are our real financial statements, Robert. Not the simplified versions I've shown you over the years because you weren't interested in the details. I laid out documents methodically: bank statements, investment reports, old tax returns, loan payoff notices. Evidence of 35. Years of financial management that told a very different story than the one Robert believed. The down payment for our first house? That wasn't from your business profits. We were still paying off your father's business debts. It was from my inheritance when my grandmother died. I placed the deed on the table. Olivia's college fund? That wasn't from the insurance agency's good years. It was from the rental property I purchased with my accounting business profits. The property on Lakeview Drive that's in my name only. Because you said real estate was too much hassle to bother with. I slid across the property tax statements. And when your mother needed a new roof in 2010, that $30,000 didn't come from her mysterious savings like you told everyone. It came from our vacation fund. She paid us back $5,000 and conveniently forgot the rest, while buying her new Mercedes that same year. Vivian made a small choking sound. The business survived because I kept us afloat during the lean times. I paid off your father's debts, without telling you because you were already stressed. I restructured our finances repeatedly to accommodate your impulsive decisions. I built our retirement savings despite the obstacles. Robert stared at the documents, his expression shifting, from anger to confusion to the beginning of something that looked like shame. If your mother moves in here, I continued quietly, it won't be into my studio, and it won't be under the pretense that she can't afford proper care. It will be with honesty about her financial situation and with appropriate compensation to us for providing that care. You can't speak to me this way, Vivian hissed, dropping the fragile act entirely. Robert, are you going to let her talk to me this way? Robert looked at his mother, then back at the financial evidence of decades of silent support from the woman he'd married. Mom, he said slowly, is what Ellie's saying about your finances true? Do you really have $2 million? Vivian's face contorted. That's my money. Your father left it to me, not to you, and certainly not to her. I never said it wasn't your money, I replied calmly. I said you should use it for your care instead of pretending to be financially constrained while Robert and I compromise. Our retirement. The kitchen fell silent except for the ticking of the clock I'd bought on our 20th anniversary. I waited, watching Robert's face, wondering if 35 years of partnership would count for anything against a lifetime of maternal manipulation. Helen broke the silence. I think we all need to calm down. This is clearly a misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, I interrupted. It's a pattern, and it stops today. I closed the folder and looked directly at Robert. I've spent 35 years making our life work behind the scenes while you took credit for our financial stability. I've watched you consistently choose your mother's version of reality over the truth. Now you need to decide what matters more, the comfortable fiction you've been living in, or the actual facts of our life together. Robert looked genuinely lost. Ellie, I don't understand why you're doing this now. Why didn't you tell me any of this before? Because you didn't want to know, I said simply. Because every time I tried to discuss finances in detail, you changed the subject. Because I loved you and wanted you to feel successful and unburdened. That was my mistake. I stood up. I'm going to Martha's for the night. When I come back tomorrow, we can either have an honest conversation about our future, including your mother's care, or I can contact a divorce attorney. After 35 years, I deserve at least that much clarity. I packed an overnight bag while they sat in stunned silence. As I reached the door, Robert finally spoke. You'd end our marriage over this? Over money and a room for my mother? I turned back one last time. No, Robert. Not over money or a room. Over respect. Over truth. Over whether, after 35 years together, you see me as an equal partner or just as a convenient support system for the Mitchell family drama. I closed the door quietly behind me, got into my car, and drove away from the house I had helped build, financially and emotionally, for 3.5 decades. I had no idea if I would ever truly come home again. But for the first time, in years I was driving towards something, not just away from it. The possibility of being seen for who I really was. The drive to Martha's house was only 15 minutes, but it felt like crossing an ocean. 35 years of marriage, and this was the first time I had ever truly walked away from a conflict with Robert. My hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel as I navigated the familiar streets of Lakeside, past the community center where I'd volunteered for decades, past the elementary school where I'd walked Olivia to kindergarten, past the insurance office where Robert had built his career, while I built our life. Martha opened her door before I could even knock. Concern etched across her face. In a town like Lakeside, news traveled fast. Someone had probably seen Vivian and Helen arriving at our house with stern expressions and already sensed trouble brewing. "Oh, Ellie," Martha said, pulling me into a hug. Come in. Come in." I hadn't realized I was crying until I felt the dampness on her shoulder. Martha Wilson had been my friend since that first lonely year in Lakeside. She was the only person who had ever truly seen me. Not as Robert Mitchell's wife or Olivia's mother or the competent accountant, but as Eleanor, the woman who had dreams and frustrations and a life inside her head that didn't revolve around serving others. "I've left him," I said, the words sounding strange in my mouth. "At least for tonight. Maybe forever." Martha didn't seem surprised. She led me to her kitchen, warm and cluttered unlike my own meticulously organized one, and poured me a generous glass of wine. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. The words poured out of me like water. From a broken dam, every compromise, every silent resentment, every moment of putting Robert and Vivian's needs ahead of my own. I told her about the financial deceptions, the thankless years of keeping our family solvent while Robert believed in his own financial acumen. I told her about my art studio, the one space that was truly mine, and Vivian's impending invasion. "She has millions, Martha," I said, refilling my wine glass. "Literally millions in investments, and she's letting her son believe she's nearly destitute. And Robert," my voice broke. After 35 years, he believed her over me without a second thought. Martha reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You know this isn't really about the money, don't you?" I nodded slowly. "It's about respect, about being seen, about finally being tired of being taken for granted. You've spent your whole marriage making yourself smaller, Ellie, hiding your light so Robert could shine." "I thought that's what a good wife did," I whispered. Martha snorted. "That's what Vivian Mitchell thinks a good wife does. The rest of us figured out decades ago that it's a recipe for resentment." I stayed up late into the night, talking and crying and finally falling into an exhausted sleep in Martha's guest room. The next morning, I woke to a string of texts from Robert. "Where are you?" "This is ridiculous. Come home." "Mom is very upset. She thinks you hate her." "I don't understand why you're turning this into such a big deal." Not one word of understanding, not one acknowledgement of what I had revealed, not one sign that he had spent the night reflecting on 35 years of my silent support. I texted back a single line. "I'll be home at noon to talk." When I pulled into our driveway at precisely 12 I half expected to see Vivian's car, still there. Instead, only Robert's sedan sat in its usual spot, a small Mercy. I took a deep breath and walked into the house that no longer felt entirely like home. Robert was waiting in the living room, sitting stiffly in his recliner like a man preparing for battle. His face was drawn, with dark circles under his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept well either. "You came back," he said, his tone somewhere between relief and accusation. I said I would. I set my overnight bag down but remained standing. "Are you ready to have an honest conversation?" Robert rubbed his face wearily. "Ellie, I don't even know what that means anymore. Yesterday, you ambushed me with all these accusations and revelations. 35 years, and suddenly you have all these grievances? They're not sudden, I said quietly. I've been swallowing them for decades, telling myself it was for the best, that keeping the peace was more important than being acknowledged. So now what? He asked, spreading his hands. What exactly do you want from me? It was such a simple question, but I realized I had never really asked it of myself. What did I want? After decades of putting everyone else's needs first, what did Eleanor Mitchell actually want? I want you to see me, I said finally. Not as your support system or your mother's daughter-in-law or the family accountant. I want you to see me as a person who has given up dreams and made sacrifices and kept this family functioning, often without acknowledgement or thanks. Robert's expression hardened. So I'm the villain in this story? The ungrateful husband who never appreciated his selfless wife? That's not what I said. It sounds exactly like what you're saying. He stood up abruptly. You know, I've made sacrifices too, Ellie. I stayed in this town when I could have sold the agency after Dad died and done something else. I worked 60-hour weeks so you could have this house, so Olivia could have everything she needed. I know that, Robert. I've always acknowledged that. Have you? Because it sounds like you've been quietly keeping score all these years, tallying up resentments. I took a deep breath. This wasn't going how I'd hoped. I'm not keeping score. I'm asking for honesty. I'm asking you to acknowledge that I've been managing our finances and keeping us afloat while you and your mother maintained this fiction about her financial situation. I'm asking you to recognize that converting my studio, the one space that's truly mine, isn't a small thing to ask. Robert paced the living room, agitated. Mom needs care, Ellie. What am I supposed to do? Tell her to go live with strangers when we have space right here? She has more than enough money for excellent care, Robert. Care that would be better for her than what we can provide. Professional care. She doesn't want that, he shouted. She wants to be with family. Why is that so hard for you to understand? Because it's not the truth, I said firmly. If your mother truly needed to live with family because she couldn't afford care, that would be a different conversation. But she's lying to you, Robert. She's been lying for years about her finances, and you've never questioned it because it fits the story you want to believe. That your father left her well cared for. That you're the dutiful son protecting her interests. Robert flinched as if I'd struck him. You're twisting everything. Mom has always been honest with me. Then explain these. I pulled out copies of Vivian's investment statements from my bag. Copies I'd made years ago when I first realized the extent of her deception. $2 million, Robert. That's what your mother has in investments alone, not counting her house or her other assets. $2 million that would easily pay for the best care available without significantly depleting the principal. He took the statements reluctantly, scanning them with a furrowed brow. These could be outdated. Maybe she's used most of this by now. They're not outdated. I do her taxes every year, remember? Her net worth has only increased. She lives on the interest and dividends, barely touching the principal. She has more than enough. Robert sank back into his chair, the statements clutched in his hand. For a moment, doubt flickered across his face. Then his expression hardened again. Even if this is true, and I'm not saying it is, Mom wants to live with us. She's my mother, Ellie. I can't just ship her off to some facility, no matter how nice it is. And what about what I want? I asked quietly. Does that factor into your decision at all? He looked genuinely confused. Of course it does. But this is my mother we're talking about. She raised me, sacrificed for me. I owe her. And what do you owe me? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with 35 years of history. Robert stared at me, and for the first time, I saw something like real fear in his eyes. Fear that he might have to choose, that the careful balance of his world was truly disrupted. I don't understand why you're making me choose, he said. Finally. This isn't like you, Ellie. You've always been reasonable, always understood family obligations. I've spent 35 years being reasonable, I replied. I'm tired of reasonable. I want honest. I want fair. Robert shook his head slowly. I need time to think about all this, to process. Mom's waiting at Helen's for me to call her, to tell her it's safe to come back. Safe? I repeated incredulously, as if I'm some kind of threat. You know how she is. She's sensitive. Yesterday upset her. Yesterday upset her? I could hear my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Robert, yesterday I discovered that after 35 years of marriage, you automatically believe you're mother over me. You dismiss my professional expertise, and you're willing to sacrifice the one space that's mine without even a real discussion. But yes, by all means, let's worry about how Vivian feels. Robert stood up, his face flushed. I think we both need to calm down. This conversation isn't productive. No, I agreed. It isn't, because you're still not hearing me. I picked up my bag again. I'm going to stay at Martha's a bit longer. When you're ready to have a real conversation, one where you actually consider my perspective, let me know. You're leaving again? Robert's voice rose in disbelief. What about dinner? What about the Petersons coming over tomorrow night? The absurdity of his questions, his concern for routine and appearances even as our marriage crumbled, nearly made me laugh. Cancel the Petersons and make your own dinner. You're 65 years old, Robert. It's time you learned how. I walked out the door for the second time in 24 hours, but this time without tears. This time, a strange sense of calm had settled over me. The calm of finally standing up for myself after decades of accommodation. Back at Martha's, I tried to call Olivia, not wanting her to hear about our separation through Lakeside's gossip network. But she didn't answer, likely in a meeting at her architectural firm in Seattle. I left a simple message asking her to call when she had time. You can stay as long as you need, Martha assured me, setting up her guest room more permanently. George is on that fishing trip in Canada for another week, so I welcome the company. I don't even know how long this will take, I admitted, or what this even is. A separation? A wake-up call? The beginning of the end? Martha patted my hand. Whatever it is, it's about time. I've watched you shrink yourself for decades, Ellie. Maybe now you can finally grow back to your full height. That evening, I received a text from Robert. Mom and I talked. She admits she has more savings than I realized, but says it's set aside for emergencies and medical costs. She's afraid of running out of money if she goes into a facility. Can we please discuss this rationally tomorrow? The house feels empty without you. I showed Martha the message. She snorted. Translation. Mom's still lying, but with a slightly different lie, and I'm believing her because it's easier than confronting the truth. I nodded, typing a response. I'm happy to talk when you're ready to be honest about everything. Not just your mother's finances, but the way you've dismissed my contributions to our marriage. And I need you to understand that my art studio is non-negotiable. His reply came quickly. Why are you being so rigid? Compromise is part of marriage. I stared at my phone, a lifetime of swallowed responses rising in my throat. Finally, I typed, Yes, Robert, compromise is part of marriage. I've been doing it for 35 years. It's your turn. The next morning, I woke to a missed call from Olivia and a voicemail filled with concern. Mom, what's going on? Dad called me last night saying you've left him? Something about Grandma Vivian? Call me back as soon as you can. I groaned. Of course, Robert had called Olivia, probably painting me as unreasonable and himself as the victim. I called her back immediately. Mom. Her voice was tense with worry. Are you okay? What's happening? I'm fine, sweetheart. I'm staying at Martha's for a few days while your father and I work through some issues. Dad says you refused to let Grandma Vivian move in even though she needs help. That doesn't sound like you. I sighed, settling onto Martha's porch swing. That's your father's version. The reality is more complicated. Your grandmother has plenty of money for professional care, more than enough. But she's been hiding her financial situation from your father for years, letting him believe she's struggling. Wait, what? Grandma Vivian is rich? Since when? Since always. Your grandfather left her very well provided for, but she's maintained this fiction of living on a tight budget. I've known the truth because I do her taxes, but your father refused to believe me when I finally told him. Okay, that's weird. But why is this suddenly an issue now? I explained about the studio, the retirement sale of the agency, and the years of financial management behind the scenes. Olivia listened quietly, occasionally making small sounds of surprise or distress. "Oh, Mom," she said finally. "I had no idea. You never said anything about any of this." I didn't want to burden you with it, and honestly, I'd convinced myself it wasn't that important, that keeping peace in the family mattered more than getting credit. "But it is important," Olivia insisted. "Dad needs to understand what you've done for the family, and Grandma Vivian." She trailed off. I always thought she was living on Social Security and a small pension. She made such a big deal about watching her budget. While taking Mediterranean cruises and buying new luxury cars, I added dryly. The budget concerns were always very selective. "This is unbelievable," Olivia muttered. "Dad made it sound like you were just being difficult about sharing space." "I'm sure he believes that's what this is about," I said sadly. "He's never really seen me, Olivia. Not the real me, with needs and dreams of my own." "I see you, Mom," she said fiercely. "I've always seen you. And for what it's worth, I think you're right to take a stand. You've spent my entire life putting everyone else first." Her support brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means more than you know. Do you want me to come home? I can probably get a few days off." No, I interrupted. "You have your own life to live. This is between your father and me. We need to work it out ourselves." After we hung up, I sat on Martha's porch for a long time, watching the neighborhood children ride bikes along the sidewalk. Had I done the right thing, breaking the peace after all these years? Would Robert ever truly understand my perspective? Or had I damaged our marriage beyond repair? For the first time in decades, I didn't know what the future held. That uncertainty was both terrifying and strangely exhilarating. Later that day, I received a text from Helen, Robert's sister. "Ellie, this has gotten out of hand. Mom is distraught. Robert is miserable. Whatever point you're trying to make, surely it's not worth destroying your marriage. Mom says she's willing to help pay for a small art space for you somewhere else if that's what this is about." I showed the message to Martha, who rolled her eyes dramatically. "Yes, because your art is just a cute little hobby that can be relegated to some closet somewhere. God forbid a grown woman have space of her own in her own home." I typed a careful response. "Helen, this isn't about the studio, though that's part of it. This is about 35 years of having my needs and contributions dismissed. I'm not trying to make a point. I'm finally standing up for myself." Helen's reply was swift and indignant. "So selfish. Mom needs family now. You're being incredibly cruel to both her and Robert." I didn't respond. There was no point. Helen had always seen her mother through a child's uncritical eyes, and nothing I could say would change that perspective. That evening, Robert called instead of texting. My heart raced as I answered. "Ellie?" His voice sounded strained. "Can we talk? Really talk?" "I'm listening," I said cautiously. "Not on the phone. Would you come home for dinner?" "I'll cook." He gave a small, awkward laugh. "Well, I'll pick up from Antonio's. Your favorite linguine." The peace offering was small but sincere. "All right. What time?" 7, and Ellie. It'll just be us. Mom's staying with Helen for now." "Okay," I agreed. "I'll be there at 7." Martha looked concerned when I told her about the dinner. Plans. Are you sure you're ready? He might just be trying to butter you up to get you to give in. Maybe, I acknowledged. But we have to start somewhere. And if he's willing to have the conversation without Vivian present, that's progress. I dressed carefully for dinner, not my usual comfortable home clothes, but not formally either. I chose a deep blue blouse that Olivia had given me for Christmas, saying it brought out the color of my eyes. I wanted to look like myself, but my best self, the woman I'd almost forgotten I could be. When I arrived home, Robert was setting the table with our good dishes, the ones we usually saved for company. 2 tapered candles stood in the center of the table, and the delicious aroma of garlic and herbs filled the kitchen. "You look nice," Robert said awkwardly, taking in my appearance. "Thank you." I set my purse down but kept my light jacket on, not yet certain I would be staying. Robert gestured to the table. I thought we could use a reset. Start the conversation fresh. I nodded, taking a seat as he served the pasta and poured 2 glasses of the Chianti we both enjoyed. For a few minutes, we ate in uncomfortable silence, the weight of 35 years and 2 days of conflict heavy between us. Finally, Robert set down his fork. "I called Gary Hoffman at Merchants Bank this morning." I looked up, surprised. Gary was the bank manager who had handled the Mitchell family's accounts for decades. "He confirmed everything you said about Mom's finances," Robert continued, his voice strained. "She has over $2 million in investments. Her accounts generate more than enough income to cover assisted living costs without touching the principal. She's been lying to me for years." I set down my fork as well, watching his face carefully. "And how do you feel about that?" "Confused, angry, embarrassed." He ran a hand through his hair. "I don't understand why she would lie about something like that. Why let me worry about her financial security when she was more than fine?" "Control," I said simply. "Your mother has always used money and obligation as tools to maintain control. Over you, over your father, over everyone." Robert flinched slightly but didn't argue. "Maybe, I don't know, but that's not the only thing Gary told me." He met my eyes directly. "He mentioned a separate account in your name that I didn't know about. A substantial one." "Ah, there it was. My emergency fund," I acknowledged. "Started the first year we were married, when I realized how precarious the agency finances were after your father's stroke. Nearly $100,000, Ellie. Why keep that from me?" "Because you didn't want to know, Robert. Because every time I tried to discuss finances in detail, you changed the subject or told me not to worry about it. Because I learned very early in our marriage that you preferred the illusion of financial security to the reality of hard work and careful planning." He looked stung. "That's not fair, isn't it? When the Westbrook account left us in 2001, and we lost 30% of the agency revenue overnight, do you remember what you said when I asked how we would manage?" Robert frowned, clearly trying to recall. You said, "Don't worry your pretty head about it. I'll figure something out." Then you bought a new car 2 months later. "We needed a reliable vehicle for client visits," he protested. "We needed to cut expenses drastically, which is what I did with the household budget while you continued living as if nothing had changed." I took a sip of wine. "The emergency fund saved us more than once, Robert. I never spent a penny of it on myself. It was always for us, for Olivia, for the stability of our family." Robert was quiet for a long moment. "What else don't I know, Ellie? What other secrets have you been keeping?" "They're not secrets. They're just truths you never asked about." I met his gaze steadily. "The rental property on Lakeview Drive that generates $2,000 a month in income. The investments I've managed for our retirement that have outperformed the market consistently for 2 decades. The fact that I paid off your father's business debts without telling you because you were already stressed about taking over the agency." With each revelation, Robert's expression shifted from disbelief to a dawning, uncomfortable recognition. "Why didn't you tell me any of this?" "I tried in the beginning. You weren't interested. You found finance discussions boring or stressful. After a while, I stopped trying. It seemed easier to just handle it and let you believe what you wanted to believe. That I was the provider, the successful businessman." His voice was bitter. "Was any of that real?" "Of course it was," I said softly. "You worked incredibly hard, Robert. You built strong relationships with clients. You kept the agency going through difficult times. But you never did it alone, even if that's what you chose to believe." "So where does that leave us now?" he asked, setting down his wine glass. "What happens next, Ellie?" I took a deep breath, considering my words carefully. "That depends on you, Robert. I can't go back to being invisible. I can't go back to having my needs dismissed as unimportant. And I won't give up my studio, the one space where I've finally started to rediscover myself after decades of putting everyone else first." "And my mother? What about her?" "Your mother has options, Robert. Good ones. She can afford excellent care. That doesn't mean you abandon her. You visit. You maintain. Your relationship, you ensure she's well cared for. But you don't sacrifice your marriage and my well-being for a lie she's been telling." Robert nodded slowly, absorbing my words. "I spoke with Lakeside Shores today. They have an opening in their assisted living section, a nice apartment with a view of the garden. I took a tour." Hope flickered in my chest. "And? It's very nice. Professional staff, activities, dining room. Mom would have independence but support when she needs it." "It sounds perfect for her," I said carefully. "I think it might be." He hesitated, then added, "But she's going to fight it. She's determined to move in here." "Then you have a choice to make, Robert. You can continue enabling your mother's manipulations, or you can set healthy boundaries and save our marriage." I stood up, gathering my plate. "I appreciate the dinner and the conversation. It's a start. But I need more than words now. I need to see real change." Robert rose as well, his expression troubled. "You're not staying?" "Not yet. I'll come home when I'm certain this isn't just a temporary adjustment to get me back. When I believe you truly understand what needs to be different. And if I can't convince my mother to accept assisted living?" I looked at him steadily. "Then you'll have made your choice, won't you?" I left him standing in our dining room, the candles still flickering between two half-eaten meals. The conversation had gone better than I'd feared, but not as well as I'd hoped. Robert had begun to see the truth, but whether he could act on it, whether he could finally break free from Vivian's manipulation after a lifetime under her influence, remained to be seen. As I drove back to Martha's, a text message chimed. I checked it at a stoplight, expecting it to be from Robert. Instead, it was from Olivia. "I've booked a flight home for this weekend. We need a family meeting. Love you, Mom. Stay strong." Despite everything, I smiled. My daughter was coming home not to mediate, not to convince me to back down, but to stand beside me. Whatever happened next, I would face it with at least one person who truly saw me. Olivia arrived Friday evening, stepping off the commuter flight from Detroit, with the confident posture of the professional woman she'd become. At 34, my daughter had my determination and Robert's height, a combination that made her a commanding presence. When she spotted me waiting at the small regional airport, her professional facade cracked, and I saw the worried daughter beneath. "Mom," she whispered fiercely, wrapping me in a hug that felt like coming home. She smelled of airplane air and the same jasmine perfume she'd worn since college, the one constant in her otherwise evolving style. "It's so good to see you, sweetheart," I said, my voice muffled against her shoulder. When had my little girl grown tall enough to envelop me? Olivia pulled back, studying my face with the architect's eye for detail I'd always admired. "You look tired," she announced, "but also different somehow." "Different good or different bad?" I asked, leading her toward the parking lot. "Different strong," she decided, "like you've made up your mind about something important." I smiled, a genuine smile that felt foreign on my face after days of tension. "That's remarkably perceptive." "I'm my mother's daughter," she replied simply. We drove to Martha's house. Rather than the home I'd shared with Robert for decades, I'd explained to Olivia that I was still staying with my friend, despite the dinner conversation with her father 2 nights prior. What I hadn't told her was that Robert had called twice since then, each conversation circling the same territory: his shock over his mother's financial deception, his uncertainty about how to approach her, his hope that I would be reasonable and come home while they sorted things out. "Dad wanted me to stay at the house," Olivia said, as we carried her luggage into Martha's guest bedroom. Martha had insisted on staying with her sister in Grand Rapids for the weekend to give us privacy. "I told him I needed to stay with you. I hope that's okay." "More than okay," I assured her. "Though I'm not sure Martha's spare room is as comfortable as your old bedroom." Olivia waved this off. "I'm not here for comfort, Mom. I'm here for you, and to understand what's really going on." We settled in Martha's cozy kitchen with mugs of tea. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the antique clock in the hallway and the occasional passing car. I waited for Olivia to speak, sensing she had rehearsed her approach on the flight. "I talked to Dad yesterday," she began carefully. "He says you're being stubborn about Grandma Vivian moving in, that you're suddenly making ultimatums after 35 years of marriage." I nodded, unsurprised. "And what do you think?" "I think that's Dad's perspective, which is probably heavily influenced by Grandma Vivian." She took a sip of tea. "I want to hear your perspective, all of it. Not just about this specific situation, but about the marriage in general. About your life, Mom. The real version, not the edited one you've always given me." Her words hit me with unexpected force. Had I been editing my life for my daughter too? Creating a sanitized version where her mother was content with her choices, where the compromises didn't cut so deep. "That might take a while," I warned. Olivia set down her mug with quiet determination. "I have all weekend." So I told her. Not the abbreviated version I'd given Martha, not the focused argument I'd presented to Robert, but the full, unvarnished truth of 35 years as Eleanor Mitchell. I told her about giving up the Chicago position, about the early years of marriage when I'd discovered Robert's father's business debts, about the careful financial management that Robert had never fully understood or appreciated. I told her about the art classes I'd abandoned when she was born, the gradual narrowing of my world to accommodate Robert's career and Vivian's expectations. I described the rental property I'd purchased with my accounting earnings, the emergency fund that had saved the family during financial crises, the retirement planning I'd done while Robert remained blissfully ignorant of the details. "I never wanted you to see the inequity of it," I admitted. "I wanted you to believe you were growing up in a partnership, not whatever this actually was." "A one-sided sacrifice," Olivia supplied, her expression troubled. "Mom, why did you accept it for so long?" I stared into my tea, searching for an answer that made sense. It happened so gradually. Each accommodation seemed reasonable in the moment. Each compromise felt like what a good wife would do. And I did love your father, Olivia. I still do in some ways. He's a good man in many respects, hardworking, loyal to his clients, devoted to you. But not truly devoted to you, she observed quietly. Not in the way I needed, I agreed. Robert has always seen me as an extension of himself, a support system for his life and career. The dutiful wife who manages the domestic details while he handles the important matters. Except I was handling important matters too, financial decisions that affected our entire future, without recognition or real partnership. Olivia leaned back in her chair, processing. And Grandma Vivian? She's been lying about her finances. All this time? Yes. Your grandfather left her extraordinarily well provided for. She has investment accounts worth over $2 million, plus the house and other assets. She's never been in financial need, despite the careful image she projects. Why would she lie about that, especially to Dad? Power, I said simply. As long as Robert believes she's financially vulnerable, he feels obligated to prioritize her needs. It's a form of emotional manipulation she's perfected over decades. Olivia shook her head. Disbelief etched across her face. I always thought, Grandma was just frugal because she had to be. All those comments about watching her pennies, about not being able to afford things, it was all an act? An extremely effective one. Your father built his entire understanding of family obligation around protecting his supposedly financially insecure mother. And now she wants to move in with you, claiming she can't afford proper care elsewhere. Exactly, but it's not just about the money, Olivia. It's about my space, my studio, being the automatic sacrifice. It's about 35 years of my needs being secondary. It's about Robert believing his mother over me without question, even though I've been handling her taxes for decades. Olivia reached across the table and took my hand. I believe you, Mom, and I think it's about time you stood up for yourself. Her expression turned determined. I want to see these financial records for myself, and then I think we need to have a family meeting, all of us, including Grandma Vivian. The next morning, Olivia and I spent hours going through the financial documentation I'd brought from my office. With her architectural training, she had a good eye for details and patterns. She asked insightful questions about the family finances, the agency's history, and Vivian's investment portfolio. This is impressive, Mom, she said, reviewing the growth charts of our retirement accounts. You've been a financial mastermind while letting Dad think he was the provider. It wasn't entirely intentional, I admitted. In the beginning, I tried to involve him in financial discussions. He found them stressful and boring. Eventually, it seemed easier to just handle things and give him the highlights. Still, you've been carrying this family financially for decades. Does Dad have any idea? He's beginning to. Our conversation the other night opened his eyes somewhat, though. I'm not sure he's fully processed the implications yet. Olivia tapped the documents thoughtfully. I've texted Dad. We're meeting at the house for lunch. I told him to expect both of us, and that we'd be discussing everything. She hesitated. I also told him Grandma Vivian should be there. My stomach tightened. Are you sure that's wise? She's quite skilled at manipulating situations, especially when she feels cornered. That's exactly why she needs to be there, Olivia insisted. This has to be addressed directly, with all the cards on the table. No more family secrets, no more hidden resentments, no more manipulations. At precisely noon, we pulled into the driveway of my home, the home I hadn't slept in for nearly a week now. Robert's sedan was there, as was Vivian's luxury Lexus. The sight of it sparked a flicker of anger in my chest. Even her choice of vehicle was a tell, if Robert had ever been willing to see it. Ready? Olivia asked, her hand on the car door. As I'll ever be, I replied. Robert opened the front door before we reached it. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than they'd been a week ago. His expression was guarded as he greeted us. Olivia, Ellie. He stepped back to let us in. Your mother is in the living room. The deliberate pause before mother wasn't lost on me. In Robert's world, mothers were sacred, beyond criticism. My challenging Vivian had upset his entire worldview. Vivian sat regally in the armchair she always claimed during visits, the one with the best view of both the television and the window overlooking the garden. At 86, she remained a handsome woman, her silver hair styled in an expensive salon cut, Her clothes casually elegant in a way that suggested money without flaunting it. Her only concession to age was the carved wooden cane leaning against her chair. "Olivia, darling," she exclaimed, extending her arms for an embrace. "What a lovely surprise! Though I can't imagine why you felt the need to fly all this way just because your mother is having one of her moods." Olivia accepted the hug briefly, but didn't take the bait. "Hello, Grandma. It's not a mood, and we all know it. We need to have an honest conversation as a family." Vivian's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, dear. Though I've always found that family matters are best handled privately, not with such formality." "Privately is how we got here," Olivia replied calmly. "Let's eat first, and then we'll talk." Robert had ordered sandwiches from the local deli, a peace offering of sorts, since he knew it was one of my favorites. We ate in strained silence, the tension at the table thick enough to cut with the knives we weren't using. I could feel Vivian watching me, her gaze calculating beneath the grandmotherly exterior. When the meal was finished, Olivia stood and retrieved her briefcase, the expensive leather one Daniel had given her for her last birthday. She removed a folder containing copies of the financial documents we'd reviewed that morning. "I've spent the last day going through our family financial records," she began, her professional voice taking over. "I've also reviewed Grandma Vivian's tax returns for the past 5 years, which Mom has prepared." "That's confidential information," Vivian interjected sharply. "Eleanor had no right to share my personal financial details, even with family. Actually, Grandma, as the preparer of record, Mom has every right to discuss your returns with you or your authorized representatives. Since you've previously told everyone that Mom's work needs to be checked by your real accountant, I think we can assume you've waived some confidentiality." Olivia's tone was pleasant but firm. She'd clearly inherited some of my facility with numbers and their implications. Robert cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Olivia, I'm not sure this approach is necessary." "It is necessary, Dad," she interrupted. "Because this family has operated on half-truths and manipulations for too long." She turned back to Vivian. "Grandma, according to these records, you have investment accounts totaling over $2 million. You have dividend and interest, income exceeding $95,000 annually. You own your home outright, with no mortgage. Your car is paid for. You have no significant debts." Vivian's face remained impressively composed, though a slight flush colored her cheeks. "And what business is that of yours, young lady?" "It becomes my business when you claim you can't afford proper care and need to displace my mother from her home and studio." Olivia's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "It becomes my business when you manipulate my father with false claims of financial insecurity. It becomes my business when your lies threaten my parents' marriage." "Olivia!" Robert looked shocked at his daughter's directness. "You can't speak to your grandmother that way." "Actually, I can," Olivia replied calmly. "I'm speaking the truth, which is something this family hasn't done nearly enough of. Grandma has substantial financial resources that would easily cover the cost of quality assisted living care. Instead, she's chosen to lie about her finances to manipulate you into making Mom sacrifice her space and peace of mind." Vivian's composure finally cracked. "You ungrateful child. After everything I've done for this family." "What exactly have you done for this family, Grandma?" Olivia asked, still maintaining her professional tone. "When Dad's agency was struggling, did you offer financial assistance? When Mom worked multiple jobs to keep everything afloat during hard times, did you acknowledge her contribution? When I needed braces and piano lessons and college tuition, was it your supposedly limited resources that provided them?" Vivian turned to Robert, her expression morphing into wounded dignity. "Are you going to let them attack me like this? Your own mother?" Robert looked trapped, his gaze darting between his mother and his daughter. "Mom, they're not attacking. They're asking legitimate questions about why you've misrepresented your financial situation." "Misrepresented?" Vivian scoffed. Robert, you know how careful I've had to be with the money your father left me. He worked so hard to provide for me. I couldn't just squander it. No one is suggesting. You squander anything, I interjected quietly. We're suggesting you use your ample resources to secure appropriate professional care, rather than expecting Robert and me to convert my studio into a bedroom, when you can easily afford better options. Vivian's eyes narrowed at me. Always about your precious studio, isn't it, Eleanor? So selfish, putting your little hobby ahead of family obligations. It's not a hobby, Grandma, Olivia said before I could respond. It's Mom's passion, one she set aside for decades while raising me and supporting Dad. And even if it were just a hobby, she's entitled to space of her own in her own home. She turned to Robert. Dad, you've seen the financial records now. You know Grandma can afford excellent care. What do you think should happen? Robert looked deeply uncomfortable, caught between the two powerful women who had shaped his life, his mother and his daughter. His gaze finally settled on me, the woman he'd married but perhaps never truly seen until now. Ellie has been managing our finances for 35 years, he said slowly. She's never steered us wrong. If she says Mom has the resources for assisted living, I believe her. The simple statement, I believe her, hit me with unexpected force. After decades of having my expertise dismissed or minimized, hearing Robert acknowledge his trust in my judgment felt monumental. Vivian sensed the shift immediately. Robert, you can't possibly be taking her side in this. I'm your mother. This isn't about sides, Mom, Robert replied, his voice gaining strength. It's about facts. You have the financial resources to afford professional care. You don't need to move in with us out of economic necessity. It's not just about money, Vivian protested, shifting tactics seamlessly. It's about family, about being surrounded by loved ones in my final years, not strangers in some institution. The Lakeside Shores facility isn't an institution, I pointed out. It's a luxury assisted living community with private apartments, social activities, and professional care. You'd have independence with support when needed, and we would visit regularly. It's not the same as being with family, Vivian insisted, a calculated tremor entering her voice. Robert, surely you understand. Robert hesitated, his lifetime of conditioning at war with the financial reality Olivia and I had presented. Mom, I've visited Lakeside Shores. It's really nice. Nicer than our house in many ways. You'd have your own space, professional help when you need it, and we'd see you several times a week. And if your falls are becoming more frequent, as you claim, Olivia added pointedly, wouldn't you want trained professionals available immediately rather than relying on Mom and Dad, who both have health limitations of their own? Vivian's expression hardened as she realized she was losing ground. I see how it is. You've all turned against me. After everything I've sacrificed. What exactly have you sacrificed, Grandma? Olivia interrupted, her patience visibly wearing thin. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Mom is the one who's been making all the sacrifices in this family. How dare you? No, how dare you? Olivia shot back. How dare you lie about your finances for decades? How dare you manipulate Dad into believing you're struggling when you're sitting on millions? How dare you try to force Mom out of her studio when you can afford better care than they could ever provide? Olivia, Robert said softly, placing a hand on her arm. I understand your frustration, but let's keep this respectful. Respect goes both ways, Dad, she replied, but her tone softened slightly. Grandma hasn't shown Mom respect for 35 years. It's time that changed. An uncomfortable silence fell over the living room. Vivian sat rigidly in her chair, her expression a mixture of anger and calculation. Robert looked torn. Decades of maternal conditioning warring with the financial reality he could no longer deny. Olivia remained standing, the folder of evidence still open on the coffee table. I took a deep breath, focusing on what I truly wanted from this confrontation. Not revenge or vindication, but honesty and a path forward that respected my needs, as well as everyone else's. "Vivian," I said carefully, "no one is suggesting you be abandoned in some terrible facility. Lakeside Shores is beautiful, with excellent care and plenty of social activities. You'd have your privacy and independence, with help available when needed. We would visit often, take you to church and family dinners, include you in holidays and celebrations." "But you just don't want me in your home," she said bitterly. "I don't want to give up my studio," I corrected. "There's a difference. And given that you have the financial resources for a better option, it seems unnecessary for me to sacrifice the one space that's truly mine after decades of putting everyone else's needs first." Robert cleared his throat. "Mom, Ellie's right. You have options that many seniors don't have. You can afford excellent care without financial strain, it seems. Unfair to insist on moving into Ellie's studio when alternatives exist." Vivian's eyes narrowed at her son. "I see she's turned you against me, too." "Nobody has turned anyone against you," Robert said with surprising firmness. "But I can't ignore the financial documentation. You've always told me you were on a fixed income, that you needed to be careful with money. Finding out that wasn't true. It makes me question other things, too." For the first time, Vivian looked genuinely unsettled. Her son, who had always prioritized her wishes and accepted her version of reality without question, was finally seeing through the manipulations. "I was being prudent," she insisted. "Your father would have wanted me to be careful with his legacy." "Dad would have wanted you to be honest with me," Robert countered. "And I think he would have wanted you to use the resources he left you for your care, not to disrupt my marriage." Vivian flinched visibly at the reference to disrupting the marriage. "Is that what she's been telling you? That I'm trying to come between you?" "No one needed to tell him," Olivia interjected. "It's been obvious to everyone except Dad how you've undermined Mom for decades. The constant inspections of her housekeeping, the dismissal of her career as playing with numbers, the subtle ways you've positioned yourself as the most important woman in Dad's life. Grandma, I love you, but your relationship with Mom has always been competitive rather than supportive." Vivian's face flushed with anger. "You have no idea what you're talking about, young lady. I have always treated Eleanor with nothing but respect." I couldn't help the small, incredulous laugh that escaped me. "Vivian, you have never once in 35 years called me by my preferred name. It's Ellie, not Eleanor, as I've mentioned countless times. That small courtesy would have been a start." Robert looked startled, as if this detail had never registered with him before. "Mom, is that true? Ellie has always gone by Ellie, even before we met." "Eleanor is more dignified," Vivian sniffed, "more befitting a Mitchell family member." "But it's not her name," Olivia pointed out. "Not the name she chooses for herself. That's exactly the problem, Grandma. You've never seen Mom as a person in her own right, just as an accessory to the Mitchell family, one that should conform to your expectations." The room fell silent again as the weight of decades of small dismissals and quiet hostilities hung in the air. Robert looked increasingly uncomfortable, as if seeing his mother through new eyes. "I think," he said finally, "that we need to move forward with the Lakeside Shores option. I've already spoken with them about availability. They have a lovely one-bedroom apartment opening next month, with a view of the gardens you've always admired when we drive past." Vivian's expression turned coldly furious. "So that's it? You're choosing her over your own mother? After everything I've done for you?" "I'm not choosing anyone over anyone," Robert replied with surprising steadiness. "I'm making a practical decision based on what's best for everyone. You'll receive better care at Lakeside Shores than we could provide. You'll have your independence and privacy. And yes, Ellie will keep her studio, which matters to her just as your independence matters to you. And if I refuse, Vivian challenged. Robert hesitated, then looked at me. In that moment, I saw something I'd rarely witnessed in our marriage. Robert. Mitchell preparing to take a stand that might displease his mother. If you refuse, he said carefully, we'll need to find another solution that doesn't involve Ellie giving up her studio. Perhaps we could convert the guest room instead, though it's much smaller and wouldn't give you the space you'd have at Lakeside Shores. Vivian's eyes widened in genuine shock. For perhaps the first time in her adult life, her son was setting a boundary she couldn't manipulate away. I need to think about this, she said stiffly. Helen can drive me home. Now, I'll call you tomorrow, Robert. Without another word, she rose, gathered her purse and cane, and moved toward the door with as much dignity as she could muster. Robert followed her, presumably to call Helen for the ride home. The front door closed a moment later, and the house felt suddenly lighter, as if a heavy fog had lifted. Olivia let out a low whistle. Well, that was intense. You were magnificent, I told her, squeezing her hand. Thank you for being so clear and direct. I'm not sure I could have stood up to her that way on my own. You shouldn't have had to, she replied. Dad should have seen through her manipulations. Years ago. Your father sees what he wants to see, I said, not unkindly. He built a narrative about his mother as the vulnerable widow who sacrificed everything for him, and about me as the competent wife who needed nothing. Both were convenient fictions that allowed him to avoid difficult truths. And now? Olivia asked as Robert's footsteps approached from the hallway. Now, I said, raising my voice slightly so Robert could hear as he re-entered the room. We need to decide where we go from here, all of us. Robert stopped in the doorway, his expression somewhere between exhaustion and hope. Helen is coming to get Mom. She's not happy. I wouldn't expect her to be, I replied. She's just lost control of a narrative she's been crafting for decades. I told her we'd help with the transition to Lakeside Shores, Robert said, sitting heavily on the couch. That we'd make sure she was comfortable and visited often. He looked at me directly. I hope that's something you're willing to do, Ellie. I know your relationship with Mom is strained, but of course I'll... Help, I interrupted gently. I've never wanted to cut Vivian out of our lives. I've only wanted honesty and respect. Robert nodded, his expression troubled. I keep thinking about all the times I dismissed your concerns or took Mom's side without question. All the times I let her subtle digs at you pass without comment. I should have stood up for you years ago. Yes, I agreed simply. You should have. Can you forgive me? He asked, his voice unusually vulnerable. I looked at my husband of 35 years, seeing both the man who had failed to truly see me and the man who was finally beginning to. Forgiveness isn't a single moment, Robert. It's a process. We have a lot to work through, not just about your mother, but about our entire marriage. Are you coming home? The question carried the weight of our future. I glanced at Olivia, who gave me an encouraging nod. Yes, I said finally. I'll come home. But things need to be different. Really different. Not just temporarily adjusted until everything slides back to the old patterns. I want that too, Robert said, reaching for my hand. I want us to be partners, real partners, not just in name. That means you need to actually understand our finances, I warned him. No more dismissing money conversations as boring or stressful. No more large purchases without discussion. Agreed. I want to learn, Ellie. I want to understand what you've been managing all these years. And my studio stays mine, I added firmly. Not just now, but permanently. It's non-negotiable. Ooh, absolutely, he agreed immediately. In fact, I was thinking, the lighting in there isn't great for painting. Maybe we should look into skylights or better fixtures. The unexpected suggestion, Robert thinking about my needs, my space, my passion, touched me more deeply than I could have anticipated. It was a small thing, but it represented something larger. The possibility that my husband might finally be ready to see me as a full person with needs and dreams of my own. I'd like that, I said softly. Olivia cleared her throat. Well, this seems like a good moment for me to make myself scarce. I'll go pick up my things from Martha's and bring them here. She looked between us with cautious optimism. Unless you'd prefer I stay somewhere else tonight? Robert and I exchanged a glance, communicating silently in the way long-married couples can. No, I said. Come home. We have a lot more to talk about as a family, and I think we're finally ready to have honest conversations. As Olivia headed out, Robert turned to me, still holding my hand. I almost lost you, he said wonderingly. After 35 years, I almost lost you, because I couldn't see past my mother's manipulations and my own assumptions. You still might, I replied truthfully. This is just the beginning, Robert. We have decades of patterns to undo. I know, he acknowledged, but I want to try. I want to be the husband you deserve, not just the one you've settled for. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of genuine hope. Not because Robert had suddenly transformed into the perfect partner, but because he was finally willing to see the problems that had been there all along. It wasn't a happy ending yet. Those only exist in fairy tales, but it was a new beginning. And after 35 years of silent compromises, a new beginning felt like enough. The next morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the bedroom windows I'd shared with Robert for decades. I'd slept deeply for the first time in days, the weight of secrets finally lifted from my shoulders. Beside me, Robert's side of the bed was empty, but I could hear him moving about in the kitchen downstairs, the familiar sounds of coffee brewing and cabinet doors opening and closing. For a moment, I lay still, taking inventory of my feelings. Relief, certainly. Hope, tentatively. But also wariness. One conversation, no matter how promising, couldn't erase 35 years of pattern. Change would require vigilance and commitment from both of us. I dressed carefully in comfortable slacks and a deep blue tunic Olivia had given me last Christmas. Clothes that felt like me, not the carefully curated Robert Mitchell's wife persona I'd unconsciously maintained for so long. When I entered the kitchen, both Robert and Olivia looked up from their coffee cups. Morning, Robert said, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. I made your favorite, the dark roast from that shop in Traverse City. It was a small gesture, but significant. Robert rarely made coffee, claiming he couldn't get the proportions right despite my explaining the process numerous times over. The years. The fact that he'd made the effort and remembered my preference felt like a tentative olive branch. Thank you, I said, accepting the steaming mug he offered. That was thoughtful. Olivia watched our cautious interaction with the careful assessment of a child witnessing her parents' tentative reconciliation. I was just telling Dad about Daniel's new project in Portland, she said, the sustainable housing development. It sounds fascinating, I replied, settling at the kitchen table. Is he enjoying the challenge? As Olivia launched into details about her husband's work, I caught Robert watching me with an expression I couldn't quite place, something between wonder and regret. When our eyes met, he didn't look away as he might have in the past. I was thinking, he said when Olivia paused for breath, that we should visit Seattle soon. We haven't seen Daniel's projects in person, and it's been too long since we've had time with both of you together. I'd like that, I said, surprised by the suggestion. Robert had always been reluctant to travel, preferring the comfort of routine and familiar surroundings. Visits to Olivia typically happened when she came to Michigan, not the other way around. We could make it an extended trip, he continued. Maybe drive down the coast afterward. Visit those art galleries in Oregon you've mentioned wanting to see. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. I'd talked about those galleries years ago, after seeing a magazine feature about the vibrant arts community in coastal Oregon. I hadn't realized Robert had been listening, much less remembering. "Dad, that's a great idea," Olivia said, beaming at him with obvious approval. "Mom would love that." "Would you?" Robert asked, his eyes still on mine. "We could go in October, when the crowds are thinner. I know how you dislike tourist season." The consideration in his voice, genuine interest in my preferences, caught me off guard. "I'd love it," I admitted, "if you're serious." "I am." He hesitated, then added, "I've been thinking about a lot of things since yesterday, about how little attention I've paid to what you enjoy, what matters to you. I'd like to change that if you'll let me." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang, an unwelcome intrusion into our tentative new understanding. Robert frowned, glancing at his watch. "It's not even 9. Who would be—" "I'll get it," Olivia volunteered, rising from her chair. A moment later, I heard Helen's strident voice in the entryway, followed by Vivian's distinctive tone, honeyed poison wrapped in fragile dignity. Robert and I exchanged glances. The Mitchell women had arrived, and they were clearly on a mission. "Robert, are you here?" Helen called, her heels clicking on the hardwood of the hallway. "We need to talk. Mother is very upset about yesterday." Robert straightened his shoulders, a gesture I recognized from countless family gatherings where he'd prepared to placate his mother and sister. But this time, something was different in his posture. Less appeasement, more resolve. "In the kitchen," he called back, his hand briefly squeezing mine under the table. Helen appeared in the doorway, elegantly dressed as always despite the early hour. Behind her, Vivian moved more slowly, leaning heavily on her cane, a prop I'd noticed she employed strategically when seeking sympathy. "Well, I see the prodigal wife has returned," Helen said, her gaze flickering dismissively over me. "How convenient." "Good morning to you too, Helen," I replied calmly. "Vivian, this is unexpected." "Unexpected?" Vivian echoed, her voice wavering with practiced vulnerability. "My own son tells me I'm being shipped off to a facility rather than welcomed into the family home, and you call our visit unexpected?" Robert stood, gesturing toward the empty chairs. "Mom, Helen, please. Sit down. Would you like coffee?" "We're not here for social niceties," Helen snapped. "We're here because Mother hardly slept last night, worrying about being abandoned in her time of need." "No one is abandoning anyone," Olivia said firmly, following them into the kitchen. "Grandma is being offered excellent care in a luxury facility that she can easily afford." "With strangers," Vivian interjected, sinking dramatically into a chair. "Surrounded by strangers instead of family." "Professional caregivers," I corrected gently. "People trained to provide the support you need as your mobility decreases." Vivian shot me a venomous glance. "Of course you'd say that, Eleanor. Anything to keep me out of your precious house." "This isn't productive," Robert interrupted, his voice firmer than I'd expected. "Mom, we've discussed this. Lakeside Shores offers amenities and care we simply can't provide here. You'd have your own apartment, privacy, social activities with people your age, and we'd visit several times a week." "It's not the same as family," Helen insisted. "Mother raised you, Robert. She sacrificed everything for you after Dad died. The least you can do is welcome her into your home now that she needs you." Robert's expression tightened. "Mom didn't raise me alone, Helen. Dad was alive until I was 30. And while I appreciate everything she did as a parent, that doesn't create an obligation for Ellie to give up her personal space when better alternatives exist." Helen looked genuinely shocked at her brother's response. "Since when do you talk this way? Mother's needs should come first. She's 86 years old." "Mom's needs are important," Robert agreed. "But so are Ellie's. So are mine. We're talking about our home, our daily lives." This decision affects all of us." "I see how it is," Vivian said, dabbing at eyes that remained suspiciously dry. "She's poisoned you against me. After one conversation, you've forgotten everything I've done for you." "No one has poisoned anyone," Robert replied with surprising patience. "And no one is forgetting your contributions, Mom. But I've learned some things recently that have changed my perspective." "What things?" Helen demanded. Robert looked at me, silently asking permission. I nodded slightly, giving him the go-ahead to discuss what we'd talked about privately. "For one thing," he said carefully, "I've discovered that Mom has significantly more financial resources than she's led me to believe. She can easily afford premium care at Lakeside Shores without financial strain." "That's private information," Helen snapped. "Eleanor had no right." "Ellie has been preparing Mom's taxes for 20 years, Robert interrupted. "She knows exactly what Mom's financial situation is. And as her son, I believe I have a right to know if Mom is misleading me about needing financial support." Helen's face flushed with anger. "So what if Mother has saved carefully? That doesn't mean she should spend her nest egg on some institution when family can provide care." "It's not about the money," I interjected quietly. "It's about honesty. Vivian has presented herself as financially vulnerable for decades while living very comfortably. That deception has affected our family dynamics in ways that weren't healthy." "Deception?" Vivian's voice rose sharply. "How dare you?" "I've always been careful with money. That's not deception, it's prudence. Driving a new luxury car every 3 years while claiming you can barely afford groceries goes beyond prudence," I pointed out. "Claiming you need to move in with us for financial reasons when you have over $2 million in investments is simply dishonest." Vivian turned to Robert, her expression morphing into wounded dignity. "Are you going to let her speak to me this way? In my own son's house?" For the first time in our marriage, Robert didn't rise to his mother's bait. "This is Ellie's house too, Mom, and she's not saying anything untrue." Vivian's mouth opened and closed in genuine shock. Never in her adult life had her son failed to take her side in a conflict. "Look," Olivia interjected, her tone reasonable but firm. "No one is suggesting Grandma be abandoned or ignored. We're talking about her living in a luxury seniors community 10 minutes from here, with her own private apartment, planned activities, dining options, and professional care when needed. We would visit multiple times a week, include her in family gatherings, and ensure she has everything she needs." "But she wouldn't be with family," Helen insisted stubbornly. "Helen," I said carefully, "has Vivian asked to move in with you and George? Your house is larger than ours, with that guest suite on the first floor." Helen flushed. "That's different. George's mother already lives with us part-time, and you value your privacy," I finished for her. "Which is perfectly reasonable. I value mine too." "It's not the same," Helen insisted, though with notably less conviction. "Isn't it?" Robert asked quietly. "You and George have a 4-bedroom house with a separate guest suite. Ellie and I have a 3-bedroom house where the smallest bedroom has been converted to Ellie's studio. The one space that's truly hers after decades of putting everyone else's needs first." Helen looked away, unable to counter this logic. Vivian, sensing her daughter's retreat, changed tactics immediately. "I thought," she said tremulously, "that family took care of each other, that we didn't ship each other off to institutions when we became inconvenient." "No one is being shipped off," Robert said firmly. "And Lakeside Shores is hardly an institution. Mom, I toured it yesterday. It's nicer than our house in many ways. Your potential apartment has a balcony overlooking the gardens, a full kitchen, a separate bedroom, and a living room large enough for your favorite furniture pieces. The dining room serves restaurant-quality meals, and there's a full calendar of activities and outings." "I'd still be alone," Vivian insisted. "You'd have privacy," Robert countered. "Independence with support when needed." Isn't that what you've always valued, Mom? Your independence? Vivian's expression flickered, calculations visible behind her eyes. Her independence had indeed been a point of pride, one she'd wielded strategically when it suited her purposes. "I'm concerned about the cost," she said, shifting tactics again. "These places are terribly expensive. Your investment income alone would cover it with money to spare," I noted. "You wouldn't even need to touch the principal, based on current market performance." Vivian shot me a look of pure venom. "Always counting other people's money, aren't you, Eleanor?" "Only when I'm preparing their tax returns," I replied evenly. "Which you've asked me to do for 20 years. Helen, recognizing that the financial argument was losing ground, tried a different approach. "What about the emotional toll? Mother is losing her home, her independence. She's gaining appropriate care and maintaining her independence." Olivia interrupted. "Grandma, be honest. Do you really want to depend on Dad and Mom for everything? For meals, for transportation, for help with personal care? Wouldn't you prefer trained professionals for those more intimate needs?" A flicker of something, perhaps genuine consideration, crossed Vivian's face. "I hadn't thought of it that way." "And at Lakeside Shores," Robert added, warming to the theme, "you'd have your privacy, your own space, your own schedule. You've always valued your routines, Mom. Living with us would disrupt that." For the first time, Vivian seemed to be actually listening, rather than simply planning her next manipulation. "I would have my own apartment, not just a room. A beautiful one-bedroom with a full kitchen and balcony," Robert confirmed. "And the option to take meals in the dining room or prepare them yourself. Complete independence with assistance available when needed." "And you would visit?" she asked, her voice smaller. "Several times a week," Robert promised. "Sunday dinners. Here, church together. Holidays as always. You wouldn't be losing family connection, Mom. You'd be gaining appropriate care in an environment designed for your needs." Vivian sat silently for a moment, her lifetime of manipulative tactics momentarily set aside as she genuinely considered the proposal. "I'd like to see this place before making any decisions," she said finally. "Of course," Robert agreed immediately. "We can tour it again today if you'd like. They're expecting us. I called yesterday after you left." Helen looked displeased by this unexpected capitulation. "Mother, you don't have to do this. We can find another solution." "I want to see the place," Vivian interrupted, surprising all of us with her firmness. "If it's as nice as Robert says, perhaps it wouldn't be so terrible." I exchanged a glance with Olivia, both of us careful to keep our expressions neutral. This was too easy. After decades of getting her way through emotional manipulation, Vivian wouldn't surrender her plan to move in with us so quickly. She was regrouping, not retreating. "I'll call them now to confirm the tour," Robert said, reaching for his phone. As he stepped into the hallway, Vivian turned to me, her expression unreadable. "I hope you're satisfied, Eleanor. You've won this round." "This isn't a competition, Vivian," I replied quietly. "It's about finding the best solution for everyone involved." "Always so reasonable," she said with a tight smile. "So practical. I wonder if Robert realizes how calculating you really are." "Mom," Olivia warned, her protective instincts flaring. "It's all right," I assured her. "Vivian is entitled to her opinions." "Such a martyr," Helen muttered, just loudly enough to be heard. I ignored the barb, focusing instead on the practicalities. "Vivian, if you decide Lakeside Shores is acceptable, we'll help with everything. Selecting which furniture to bring, arranging the move, setting up the apartment. You won't have to manage any of that alone." "How generous," she replied, sarcasm dripping from each syllable. "Planning to sort through my possessions already?" "Only the ones you want to bring," I said evenly, refusing to be baited. "The apartment is spacious but smaller than your house. You'll need to decide what matters most to you. This practical consideration seemed to hit Vivian more forcefully than any emotional argument. For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine concern cross her face. My things. I hadn't thought about having to give up my things. Not give up, I corrected gently. Choose. Select what makes the space feel like home. The rest can be stored or passed on to family members who would value them. My secretary desk, she said immediately. The one that was my mother's, and my bedroom suite. Of course, I agreed. Those would fit beautifully in the apartment. The bedroom is large enough for your queen-sized bed and nightstands. Robert returned, looking pleased. They can see us at 11. We have a couple of hours before we need to leave. Helen stood abruptly. I need to call George. He should know about these developments. As she stepped outside to make her call, Robert sat beside his mother. Mom, I want you to know that this isn't about pushing you away. It's about finding the right care as you get older. Ellie and I aren't equipped to provide the level of support you might need as time goes on. Vivian patted his hand with calculated, maternal affection. I understand, dear. You've always been such a dutiful son. I'm sure Eleanor has her reasons for wanting her space more than my company. The passive-aggressive jab didn't escape any of us, but Robert surprised me by not rising to the bait. Mom, this isn't Ellie's decision alone. It's mine too. I want you to have the best care possible, which Lakeside Shores can provide better than we can. Vivian's expression tightened almost imperceptibly, but she recovered quickly. Of course, dear. I'm sure you're right. The tour of Lakeside Shores went better than I could have hoped. The facility was even more impressive than Robert had described. Elegant, but not ostentatious, with well-appointed common areas, beautiful gardens, and genuinely warm staff. The available apartment featured large windows overlooking a landscaped courtyard, with enough space for many of Vivian's favorite pieces. Despite her determination to find fault, even Vivian seemed impressed. She asked detailed questions about meal options, care levels, social activities, and security, behaving for once like a rational adult rather than a manipulative parent. The dining room serves 3 meals daily, but you're welcome to prepare food in your own kitchen if you prefer, the tour guide explained. Many residents do breakfast and lunch in their apartments and join others for dinner in the main dining room. And medical care? Vivian asked, her voice notably free of the tremulous quality she often affected when discussing her health. We have nurses on site 24/7 and a physician who visits twice weekly. For emergencies, the hospital is 5 minutes away by ambulance. The guide smiled warmly. But our goal is to maintain your independence while providing support as needed. This isn't a nursing home, Mrs. Mitchell. It's independent living with optional assistance. By the end of the tour, even Helen had fallen silent, her objections undermined by the obvious quality of the facility. As we prepared to leave, the director handed Vivian an information packet with costs, floor plans, and services clearly outlined. Take your time reviewing everything, she said kindly. Moving is a big decision at any age, but we'd be delighted to welcome you to our community, if you decide it's right for you. In the car heading back to our house, Vivian studied the brochure with uncharacteristic focus. The monthly fee includes all utilities and weekly housekeeping, she noted. That's practical. And the dining plan, Robert added. 3 meals a day if you want them, or you can cook for yourself when you prefer. They said I could. Bring Jasper, Vivian mused, referring to her elderly Siamese cat. That's important. He wouldn't adjust well to a new home without me. I exchanged a quick glance with Robert in the rearview mirror. This practical, reasonable Vivian was unfamiliar territory. I wasn't naive enough to believe her manipulative tendencies had vanished overnight, but it seemed she was at least considering the Lakeside Shores option seriously. Back at our house, Helen immediately pulled Vivian aside for a private conversation. their heads bent together in the living room while Robert, Olivia, and I prepared lunch in the kitchen. "She's going to try something else," Olivia predicted in a low voice, arranging sandwich fixings on a platter. "This is too easy." "I agree," I replied quietly. "But at least she's seen the place now. She can't claim it's some terrible institution we're abandoning her to." Robert looked troubled. "Maybe we're being unfair. Maybe she really is just concerned about being alone." "Dad," Olivia said with surprising gentleness, "Grandma has manipulated you your entire life. It's okay to recognize that pattern while still loving her." Robert's expression shifted through a range of emotions: defensive, thoughtful, and finally, resigned. "I keep thinking about all the times I took her side without question. All the times I dismissed Ellie's concerns or perspectives because Mom presented herself as vulnerable or needy." "That's the first step," I told him, touching his arm briefly. "Recognizing the pattern." Our conversation halted as Helen and Vivian rejoined us, both wearing expressions of studied neutrality that immediately put me on alert. "The facility seems adequate," Vivian announced as if granting royal approval. "If you're certain this is what's best, Robert, I'll accept it." Her capitulation was so sudden and complete that alarm bells rang in my mind. "That's wonderful, Vivian. I think you'll be very comfortable there." "Yes. Well," she adjusted her silk scarf with practiced precision. "Helen has helped me see that perhaps some changes are necessary at my age. The stairs at my house have become challenging, and the yard maintenance is a constant concern." "Exactly," Robert agreed, clearly relieved by her apparent acceptance. "Lakeside Shores eliminates those worries. You'll have all the support you need without losing your independence." "Indeed." Vivian's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course, there are practical matters to consider. The move itself, downsizing. My possessions, selling the house. So many details." "We'll help with all of that," I assured her, still wary of this sudden cooperation. "That's very generous," Helen interjected, her emphasis making the word sound like an accusation. "But Mother will need help managing the transition financially as well. These places require significant deposits, and her investments would need to be adjusted to provide monthly income for the fees." And there it was, the real agenda behind this sudden acceptance. "I'd be happy to review the fee structure and help plan the financial transition," I offered carefully, "as I've done with Vivian's taxes for years." "That won't be necessary," Helen said smoothly. "We've discussed it, and Mother feels it would be more appropriate to have a professional financial advisor handle these matters. Someone with more specialized expertise." "I am a professional," I pointed out, keeping my tone even. "I've been managing financial matters for both personal clients and businesses for over 30 years. Yes, but this is a significant change requiring specialized knowledge of elder care finances," Helen countered. "George's brother David specializes in estate planning and senior transitions. He's offered to help Mother reorganize her investments to maximize income while protecting her assets." I glanced at Vivian, who was watching this exchange with the satisfied expression of someone who had set a trap and was watching it close. "I see. And would this reorganization involve changing the structure of Vivian's existing investments? Perhaps moving them to new management?" Helen's smile tightened. "David has recommended some adjustments for better returns. It's all quite technical." "I'm sure I could follow the technicalities," I replied. "Financial management is my profession, after all." "Mother has made her decision," Helen snapped, dropping the pretense of politeness. "She wants a fresh perspective from someone without personal involvement." Robert frowned, finally catching on to the undercurrents. "What exactly are you suggesting, Helen? That Ellie can't be trusted with Mom's finances?" "I'm saying Mother deserves independent advice at this critical juncture," Helen replied. "Surely you can understand that, Robert." I met Vivian's gaze directly. You're concerned I might mismanage your finances out of spite, is that it? After preparing your taxes accurately for 20 years? I simply want objective advice, Vivian replied with calculated dignity. Surely you can understand that, Eleanor, given the tension in our relationship. Before I could respond, Olivia stepped forward, her professional demeanor firmly in place. Grandma, I understand your concern, but before you make any changes to your financial arrangements, I'd strongly advise getting a truly independent review, not from a family member of Helen's husband, who might have his own conflicts of interest. Helen bristled visibly. David is a certified financial planner with decades of experience. So is my husband Daniel, Olivia countered smoothly. He manages investments for several architectural firms and has no personal stake in Mitchell family dynamics. If you want truly independent advice, he could review your portfolio and the Lakeside Shores fee structure without bias. Vivian looked momentarily disconcerted by this unexpected suggestion. I wouldn't want to impose on Daniel. He's so busy with his career. He'd be happy to help, Olivia insisted. In fact, I spoke with him this morning, and he's offered to video conference with us this afternoon if you'd like. No pressure, no changes, just information and analysis. Helen and Vivian exchanged a quick, alarmed glance that confirmed my suspicions. This wasn't about getting independent financial advice. This was about getting Vivian's assets away from any oversight I might provide, perhaps shifting them toward investments that would benefit Helen or David in some way. That's very kind, Vivian said finally, her voice tight. Perhaps another time. Helen and I should be going. I'm feeling rather tired after all this excitement. Of course, Robert said, still looking confused by the sudden shift in atmosphere. I'll drive you home. As they gathered their things, I held back, letting Robert handle the goodbyes. Only when they had departed did I turn to Olivia with a resigned sigh. Well, that was illuminating. Completely transparent, she agreed. They're trying to get Grandma's money away from your oversight. I wonder what they're planning. Nothing good, I replied. But at least Vivian is considering Lakeside Shores seriously. That's progress, even if her financial manipulations continue. When Robert returned 30 minutes later, his expression was troubled. Mom kept asking questions about her investments on the drive home. Whether I thought she should diversify more, whether George's brother was trustworthy as a financial advisor. And what did you tell her? I asked carefully. That she should stick with the system that's worked for decades. Your management. Of her taxes and the investment firm she's used since Dad died. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I don't understand why she's suddenly concerned about her investments when they've performed so well for years. She's looking for a way to maintain control, I explained gently. If she can't move in with us and disrupt our lives directly, she'll try to create financial entanglements or concerns instead. Robert sank into a kitchen chair, looking suddenly exhausted. Has it always been like this? This manipulation? These hidden agendas? Yes, I said simply. You just didn't see it before. He nodded slowly, absorbing this truth. I'm beginning to understand how blind I've been. Not just about Mom, but about our whole marriage. About your contributions, your sacrifices. He looked up at me, his expression raw with realization. You've been carrying so much, Ellie, for so many years, and I never truly saw it. You're seeing it now, I said quietly. That's what matters. Olivia cleared her throat softly. I think I'll take a walk, give you two some space to talk. As our daughter slipped out the back door, Robert reached for my hand across the kitchen table. I want to do better, Ellie. I want to be a true partner, not just the husband who takes everything for granted. I want to see you, really see you, after all these years. For the first time in decades, I felt truly hopeful about our future together. Not because Robert had transformed overnight, but because he was finally willing to look clearly at the patterns that had shaped our marriage. It wasn't an ending. It was a new beginning, at an age when many couples simply resigned themselves to the status quo. "That's all I've ever wanted," I told him, squeezing his hand. "To be seen, to be valued, to be an equal partner in our life, together." "I'm ready to really see you," he promised, "starting now." 3 months passed with surprising swiftness. Autumn painted Lakeside in vibrant hues of crimson and gold as the town prepared for its annual harvest festival. The morning air carried a crisp chill that promised winter wasn't far behind, though the sun still warmed the afternoons enough for comfortable walks along the lakeshore path. Vivian had moved into Lakeside Shores 6 weeks earlier, after a flurry of activity, selecting furniture, sorting possessions, and preparing her house for sale. The transition hadn't been without drama. Helen had continued pushing for George's brother to take over Vivian's financial management, leading to several tense family discussions. In the end, Olivia's suggestion of a truly independent financial advisor had prevailed, with a respected planner from Grand Rapids reviewing Vivian's portfolio and confirming what I'd known all along. Her investments were already well structured for her needs, requiring only minor adjustments to accommodate the Lakeside Shores fees. To everyone's surprise, Vivian had adapted to her new living situation with unexpected grace. Her apartment, furnished with her favorite pieces and decorated with familiar treasures, quickly became a point of pride. She'd even begun hosting small gatherings for new friends in the common room, serving her famous lemon bars and holding court like the social queen she'd always imagined herself to be. "Mrs. Mitchell is quite the social butterfly," the activities director had told me when I stopped by with fresh flowers for Vivian's apartment. "She's organized a bridge club and volunteers in our library twice a week. Several residents have mentioned how much they enjoy her stories about Lakeside's history." I wasn't naive enough to believe Vivian had entirely abandoned her manipulative tendencies. She still made occasional barbed comments about my banishing her from family life, particularly when Robert visited without me. She still called me Eleanor, despite my continued corrections, but the worst of her interference had subsided, perhaps because she'd found a new audience for her carefully curated life story. More importantly, the changes in my marriage continued to unfold in ways both subtle and profound. Robert had begun accompanying me to my weekly art class at the community center, not to participate, but to genuinely understand my passion. He'd shown interest in our finances, sitting beside me at the desk as I explained our investments and retirement planning. He'd started asking questions about my preferences, for dinner, for weekend activities, for future travel, and actually listening to my answers. "I'm thinking about selling the house," I said one Sunday afternoon as we walked along the lakeshore path, golden leaves crunching beneath our feet. We'd begun making these walks a regular ritual, carving out time to talk without distractions. Robert glanced at me, surprised but not alarmed. "Our house? Why?" "It's too big for just the two of us now that you're retired. The stairs will become an issue eventually. And it holds so many memories of old patterns." I hesitated, then added, "I thought we might look at those new condos on River Street, the ones with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor." "The luxury ones? They're beautiful, but expensive." I smiled, still adjusting to this new version of Robert who discussed financial matters directly rather than delegating them to me while remaining willfully ignorant. "We can afford it. The market value of our house has increased significantly, and our investment portfolio is performing well above projections." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "A fresh start might be nice. New memories, new patterns." He took my hand, his fingers warm against the autumn chill. "What about your studio space, though? The condos have smaller footprints." The question, his immediate consideration of my needs, warmed me more than any sunshine could have. The corner units have that glassed-in sunroom, perfect natural light for painting, and the downtown location would put me closer to the art gallery where I've been showing my work. "You've really thought this through," he noted with a smile. "I have," I admitted, "but I wouldn't make a decision without your full input. We're partners in this, Robert. Equal partners." He squeezed my hand, understanding the significance of those words after 35 years of imbalance. "Equal partners," he agreed. "Let's look at the condos this week." That evening, Olivia called from Seattle, her weekly check-in that had become even more regular since her visit 3 months ago. I put her on speaker so Robert could join the conversation from his recliner, where he was reviewing brochures from the River Street condos we'd requested earlier. "How's Grandma settling in?" she asked after we'd caught up on her work and Daniel's latest project. "Surprisingly well," Robert replied. "I visited yesterday and she was hosting a book club meeting in her apartment. 5 ladies discussing some best-selling thriller and drinking sherry at 2 in the afternoon." "Grandma in a book club? Drinking sherry with the girls?" Olivia laughed in genuine delight. "I never would have predicted that." "People can surprise you," I said, thinking not just of Vivian, but of Robert, of us. "If you give them the chance to grow into something new." "Speaking of new," Robert interjected, "we're thinking of selling the house, looking at those Harborview condos downtown." "Really?" Olivia sounded intrigued rather than concerned. "Those are gorgeous, the modern ones with all the glass." "That's right," I confirmed. "More manageable space, no stairs, and walking distance to everything in town, plus amazing natural light for my painting." "Your painting has really taken off," Olivia noted with obvious pride. "Daniel keeps showing everyone the landscape you sent us. His boss wants to commission something similar for their office lobby." The casual mention of my art as something worthy of professional attention still caught me off guard. For so many years, painting had been a private passion, squeezed into spare moments between responsibilities. Now it was becoming a recognized part of my identity, not just to me, but to others. "I'd be honored to create something for them," I said, my voice catching slightly. "Let me know what size they're thinking." After we'd hung up, Robert set aside the condo brochures and looked at me with an expression I was still getting used to, one of genuine appreciation and attention. "You know," he said quietly, "I keep thinking about all the years I missed seeing you clearly. All the times I dismissed your contributions or took your support for granted. We can't change the past," I reminded him gently. "Only move forward differently." "I know." He hesitated, then continued. "But I want you to know I see you now, Ellie. Not just as my wife or Olivia's mother or the family accountant. I see you, your strength, your creativity, your wisdom. I'm sorry it took me so long." The simple acknowledgement, the seeing, was all I'd ever truly wanted. Not grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but recognition of my worth beyond my utility to others. "Better late than never," I said, reaching for his hand. The following Saturday, we visited Vivian at Lakeside Shores, bringing fresh flowers for her apartment and a selection of books from the local bookstore. She greeted us with unexpected warmth, proudly showing off new curtains she'd selected for her living room windows. "The afternoon light is much nicer with these sheers," she explained, adjusting the fabric with precise movements. And several of the ladies have commented on how elegant they look from the courtyard. "They're beautiful, Mom," Robert agreed. "The whole place looks wonderful." She preened slightly at the compliment, settling into her favorite chair as I arranged the flowers in a vase. "I'm hosting Bridge Club here on Tuesday," she announced. 4 tables. The activities director is helping me set up in the common room." As Vivian described her social calendar with obvious satisfaction, I caught Robert watching me with a small smile. We'd both expected this transition to be fraught with drama and resentment. Instead, Vivian had discovered something unexpected. A community where her social skills and desire for recognition found ready appreciation. "You were right," Robert murmured as Vivian excused herself to fetch photo albums she wanted to show us. "This was the better option for everyone." "Sometimes, the right decision isn't the easiest or most obvious one," I replied. "Sometimes it's the one that allows everyone to grow into something better." When Vivian returned, she handed me an envelope along with the photo albums. "Before I forget," she said with studied casualness, "I wanted to give you this." Inside was a check for a substantial sum, along with a gift certificate to the art supply store in Grand Rapids where I occasionally purchased special materials. "What's this for?" I asked, genuinely confused. Vivian straightened her already perfect posture. "I saw your painting in the Lakeside Gallery window last week, the sunset over the harbor. It was quite accomplished." She cleared her throat, delicately. "I thought perhaps you might create something similar for my apartment, if you're not too busy with other commissions." The request, and the implicit acknowledgement of my artistic talent, left me momentarily speechless. In 35 years, Vivian had never shown genuine interest in my painting, dismissing it as a hobby or pastime whenever it came up in conversation. "I'd be happy to," I managed finally. "Did you have a particular scene in mind?" "The gardens here in spring," she said promptly, suggesting she'd given this considerable thought. "From my balcony perspective, I've taken a few photographs you might use for reference." As she retrieved the photos, Robert squeezed my hand, his expression mirroring my own astonishment. This small gesture from Vivian, recognizing my art as valuable, worthy of display in her carefully curated space, represented a shift I had never expected to see. Later that evening, as we drove home through the quiet streets of Lakeside, Robert broke our companionable silence. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about right decisions allowing everyone to grow into something better." "What about it?" "That's what you did for us, for our marriage," he said thoughtfully. "By finally standing up for yourself, by refusing to continue the old patterns, you created space for something better to emerge, for both of us." I considered his words as we pulled into our driveway, the home we would soon leave for a new beginning. "I couldn't have done it alone," I said finally. "You had to be willing to see differently, to change too." "Better late than never?" he asked, echoing my words from earlier in the week. "Much better," I agreed. The next morning, I set up my easel in the studio, my studio, with the photographs Vivian had provided carefully arranged for reference. Sunlight streamed through the east-facing windows, illuminating my workspace with golden warmth. Soon this room would belong to someone else, but that no longer felt like loss. My art would continue in a new space, just as my marriage was continuing in a new form. As I mixed colors on my palette, preparing to create something for the woman, who had been my adversary for 35 years, I realized that standing up for myself had yielded an unexpected outcome. Not just a better marriage or a more respectful relationship with my mother-in-law, but a stronger sense of who I was, who I had always been beneath the roles and responsibilities. Vivian Mitchell, Ellie, artist, accountant, mother, wife. A woman who had finally found her voice after decades of silence. A woman who had discovered that sometimes showing someone the truth, the real financial statements, the actual balance of power, the authentic accounting of a life, was the most powerful act of all. I dipped my brush into a vibrant blue, the color of possibility, and began to paint. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.